VVPAT is the person who's sitting in the middle between the ballot unit and the control unit. So, and if there is malware in the VVPAT, the possibility of the VVPAT actually sending the wrong signal to the control.
Today, I have with me Advocate Prasanna S. He's a coder turned lawyer. He's also the founder trustee of Article 21 Trust, which is an organization that raises awareness about issues of public interest relating to technology and people. Thank you, Prasanna, for joining me on this episode of Unbreak the News.
Thank you very much for having me.
Prasanna, first things first, the Supreme Court has rejected the plea for 100% verification of EVM votes with VVPAT slips. If I'm not wrong, way back in 2019, you, as a lawyer, had represented former IAS officer M.G. Devasahayam, ex-diplomat Fabian, and retired banker Thomas Franco in the plea before the Supreme Court regarding the cross-verification of at least 30% of the EVM VVPAT vote counts. Before we get into the details of the significance of this matter, first tell us, what are your thoughts on the latest decision by the Supreme Court to reject the pleas for 100% verification of EVM votes with VVPAT slips?
I must say it is an opportunity lost and a deeply disappointing decision. Right? So this was certainly an opportunity for the court to strengthen India's democratic processes. Right? So particularly coming in the back of the CSDS survey that indicated that almost 45% of those surveyed had lost trust in the electoral process itself, that includes the EVMs and VVPATs and the technology that is employed in realizing India's electoral democracy. Right? The processes that have been employed by the Election Commission of India, right, they've been questioned several times over. Right? In fact, the question of EVMs have been before the courts at least 6 or 7 times now. Right? So most signal decision came in 2013 when the Supreme Court held in Subramaniam Swamy's case that there has to be a voter verifiable paper audit trail. So that is, so where the principle that was advanced there was that a lay voter should be able to verify himself and satisfy himself that the voting process has recorded his votes correctly and that his votes have been counted as recorded. Right? So this question, so in fact, they could, but since then, there has been a steady erosion or derogation from that principle in the processes that the Election Commission of India has employed. And for that, the only justification appears to come from the Election Commission is that we are an independent body. We have no malice. Why is it that people are not trusting our processes? Right? So this is what, and also to say that, see, there has been no incident of EVM tampering ever been established or the voter fraud ever been established. Right? So those are the justifications that are always offered. Right? But if you see whether those justifications are sufficient for an electoral democracy like ours. Right? So it is one thing to say that there has been no known incident of EVM tampering or election rigging, right, through these EVM processes. That is one stage. And the next stage is to say that, see, the processes are robust enough for technical experts to be satisfied that not only has there been no incident, but also there can be no incident. That is to say, they are not even tamperable or the results not tamperable. Right? That's the second stage.
I want to cut you
There's
here.
yet another stage. Let me complete this. So there's yet another stage to say where a lay voter is able to satisfy himself or herself that the process is fair. Right? That is when it marks or it satisfies this criterion of the process not only being fair but seem to be fair. You have now a paper trail. a voter verifiable paper trail, the voter sees that. See, there are also issues with that, certainly, yes. Right. So in the sense that, in fact, Mr. Bushan had argued how you are not able to get the slip in your hand. You're able to see it behind the screen. You don't know whether it is just a display or actually there is a paper slip. All of those problems exist. But even at least now, there is a certain process by which the voter sees. And to be able to count and tally all the EVMs is a very minimal sort of delta that is there in. And if it can give that additional sort of confidence and credibility, why not do that? And that is where I think the Election Commission did not do a great job in defending themselves, irrespective of what the court has held. The court has found their explanations to be sufficient enough, and the court just went on another tangent saying that, yes, we as citizens must trust all independent institutions.
That I found it very So, as you've said, this is a missed opportunity or a lost opportunity. But in the judgment, if you see, the Supreme Court has also given the option to get a proportion of the EVMs checked and verified by a team of engineers from the EVM manufacturers after the announcement of the results on a written request made by the candidates who are at position number 2 and number 3. And it seems the expenses, the court has said very clearly that the expenses for this should be borne by the candidates making the request. Now, do you think that this will help? Because how many candidates at the end of the day are really going to come forward and do this exercise? And this is not going to serve the purpose of ensuring that the electoral process is fair and transparent, because here the onus is on the candidates to prove that something went wrong and not on the Election Commission to prove that the election conducted was free and fair.
That's correct. That's correct. So this reversal of burden has its origins in the thinking of the court that, see, this is an independent constitutional body. So by default, we have to trust them. Right? Anybody who is beseeching the trust, who is besmirching the trust, has to bring forward evidence. So actually, the problem is that premise. That in fact, that premise is now seen across the board in our institutions, right? So this is a deeply philosophical matter, because even our Supreme Court, for example, you would have seen several cases where they are able to do sealed covers. They are able to get sealed covers from the state and then peruse only themselves, not giving it to the other party and all of that, right? But institutional independence is not something that the citizens just bestow merely because you are official, right? It needs to be earned. And the fact that you are in an official position gives you all the resources for you to earn that trust. Unfortunately, the Election Commission has failed to earn that trust, at least failed to earn the trust of an overwhelming plurality, if not a majority of people. And that is what some of these surveys show, and it is a cause for concern, and it is again disappointing that the court has not taken this opportunity.
One of the points that you made is also very interesting, where you spoke about what the court said, that while maintaining a balanced perspective is crucial in evaluating systems or institutions, blindly distrusting any aspect of the system can breed unwarranted skepticism and impede progress. Now, what do we make of this statement? Isn't it also true that we cannot blindly believe that the system is functioning effectively, especially when there has been no tangible evidence placed by the Election Commission of India that the EVMs are foolproof and they cannot be tampered with at all? So has there been any tangible evidence at all placed by the ECI on this matter?
So there is, forget about tangible evidence. So this is, you are now upholding a certain technological system. In computer science and cyber security, you will never come across this phrase blind mistrust. You will always come across the phrase blind trust. In fact, if you do a Google word phrase comparison of blind trust versus blind distrust, you will find that blind trust is actually a more common usage, and it's an idea that is well known, because the trust can be blind. Skepticism that is often healthy, and it's and in divorcing that skepticism, the court has actually fallen into the trap of thinking that merely because the Election Commission is a constitutional institution, we will need to go by it. right? It has allowed itself to fall into that trap, unfortunately.
Yeah. So earlier you had deposed before the Citizens Commission on Elections. In your deposition, you have raised some valid points. You've said that without counting of VVPAT paper slips, the objectives of verifiability and transparency in the democratic process would remain unrealized.
Unfulfilled.
Yeah. Can you please explain why you think it is necessary for the VVPAT slips to be counted?
Right. So one thing is that in Subramaniam Swami's case onwards, so the principle is now established, it needs to be voter verifiable. Right. So this is not to say that the process is bad, or that if some malware is being introduced, or that the election commission has some malicious actors. All of that. We're not going anywhere there. So if you design a process, so you have a process that is designed. Presently, for example, when you even assign EVMs to polling stations, there is a randomization process. Who do you call? You call the polling agents of all the candidates to witness that randomization process. Why do you do that? You do that because it needs to be seen to be fair. You don't say that, no, we don't have to call anybody because election commission is an independent body. We'll do that randomization ourselves. See, across it, the trend has always been whenever the election commission does something, if it can act in a manner that increases the confidence, it always does that. See, it has been the tradition of the election commission to do that, right? So therefore, and it is a very healthy tradition that is developed. It's only in the case of when it comes to contemporary things like EVM and VVPAT, and in some cases also the enforcement of model code, where it places a premium on opacity and kind of devalues transparency and any additional measure that would strengthen the fairness of the process, right? And as I said, so voter verifiability is a principle that has now been recognized, not just in India in Subramanian Swami's case, but across the world, most famously in the German Constitutional Court's case, which rejected electronic voting as even a proper method to ascertain electoral processes. Right? So voter verifiability, if that is a critical principle, and you've actually spent some 5,000 crores, 6,000 crores, how many ever thousands crores in actually manufacturing these machines and deploying those and collecting those slips. If it takes an additional day, the entire process of elections takes some 6 weeks or 8 weeks, right? So when that is the case, if it takes an additional day or two, how does that really affect the polling schedule? Right? So they may as well take that and strengthen. It's just that they've been very stubborn about it, inexplicably stubborn, and their stubbornness has in fact increased the questions on credibility of the process.
Yeah. So when a common man actually looks at this, when the public looks at these court proceedings and the media reports and all that, what they basically think is some simple questions come to the mind. Are the EVMs foolproof? If not, why not? Now, can you technically explain what is the EVM and VVPAT systems all about, and how does it operate, and what is the inherent flaw in them?
There are people, Mr. Kanan Gopinathan has written extensively about it from his experience as a returning officer while he was in the services. Right? So there are people who've written about it, but as a process, as a people process, I see what these flaws of these systems are. That is to say, right? That is when you say voter verifiability, is it just that giving a picture of the voter? His vote, is it sufficient? It is perhaps not sufficient. Right? It is for the voter to not only be satisfied that the vote is recorded as he is cast, but it will also be counted the way it is recorded. Right? So that is why, in fact, some of the petitions asked for the slip to be handed in to the voter, and the voter be able to place the slip within the ballot himself, right? So I think this is a reasonable ask, and it may not require too much of engineering or re-engineering the system. Right? So where then you already have a printer, you already have a cutter. All you need to know, instead of that printed slip falling into a box, it falls into the voter's hand and the voter puts it in the box, which is kept right next. It's not, he doesn't have to run a mile to put that slip in, right? You can place the box right next. So, and
what I'm specifically asking you is also about your petition, because I read a copy of your petition, the 2019 petition, where there was a mention about the possibilities of a cable fraud or hacking or malprogramming of the software in the EVMs to manipulate the counts and to introduce a Trojan to it. And also, you've spoken about other related technological compromises. You've been a coder in the past, you're a technologist. Can you explain what are these apprehensions and where is it actually stemming from?
When something is an electronic process, right? It's an electronic process. There is not one person, in fact, not that you can bring in any company, any expert in the world who's able to say that this machine has not been compromised. No, we've not even nuclear reactors which have been built with such high security factors. They've all been compromised, right? So, and we are living in an era where there are zero-day vulnerabilities in all systems. When that has been the case, right? So you will have to build in processes that will not only account for flaws or problems that exist, but also will account for problems that you cannot foresee at this point, but the vulnerabilities that may still exist. Right? Yeah. When that has been the case, in fact, the VVPAT system was for that. In fact, if you see the Subramanian Swamy's case, all of this, it includes, so those possibilities will always exist, and it's an acknowledgement that those possibilities will exist. And that is why you have the process built in to say you have the slip that is printed based on what you, and that is also separately kept. So this is not to say that, again, merely because you'll have what is printed and kept, it doesn't mean that the elections are not rigged. Right? So there could still be local factors that influence it. So what if there is a boot capture? Right? What if somebody puts your gun to your head and says that you press only this button? Right? All of this will happen, but that will never compromise the election wholesale. However, if there is a change, if there is a problem in the technology that you use, that compromises the election wholesale, which is why there has been such emphasis on trying to get this process correct. With actually a few minimal tweaks, this process could have been fixed, and it's an objectivist. Right? And if you see, in fact, the one that I'm particularly concerned about is the one that raises questions on the placement of the VVPAT. Right? So one is that whether it is the VVPAT, in fact, that registers the vote. Right? If that is the case, so VVPAT is the man in the middle. Right? So you press your buttons on the EVM. Ideally, that should get simultaneously recorded and printed with the VVPAT printer. But what appears to happen now, and that is actually in Mr. Deshpande's video for the Wire, if you recall, and that seems to come out in the in also the specifications of the VVPAT design that was discussed during the Supreme Court case, was that the VVPAT is like the man in the middle, where the VVPAT gets the signal from the ballot unit and transmits that signal to the control unit for the registration of the vote. So if that is the case, then the problem is there could be malware in the VVPAT. And the VVPAT itself, in fact, is a slightly more sophisticated, complex system than the ballot unit. Ballot unit is just button press. Right? It doesn't even have what are the symbols, which is a serial number. It only has a series of buttons, and it sends the signal on which button has been pressed, whether it's the first button or second button or third. EVM means the control unit and the ballot unit together.
Correct.
Right? So the ballot unit is the unit which you are actually exposed to, where you actually do the operations within that booth. Right? So where you press buttons, that is the ballot unit. So the button you press, the ballot unit is actually a fairly simple circuit, right? Whichever button is pressed, the signal that needs to be sent is the button that's pressed.
Yeah.
It is the VVPAT that has a more complex program that says, okay, this serial number, it is this person, and this is the symbol against this serial number. It has that map. Therefore, there is a program that is used to load those signals. So therefore, it's a proper software sort of stack that's there in the VVPAT. So some of the questions that have been raised, the VVPAT is the person who's sitting in the middle between the ballot unit and the control unit. So, and if there is malware in the VVPAT, the possibility of the VVPAT actually sending the wrong signal to the control. That is to say, if I press the button against the Communist Party of India, right? And it is the VVPAT that sends the signal that says it is AIIDMK. Despite printing Communist Party of India for me. Right? So where I am satisfied myself saying this is Communist Party of India and I go walk back. But what is recorded there? What is recorded there is AIIDMK. Right? So when this happens, so that is one problem that has been, in fact, Mr. Kanan Gopinathan has gone to the extent of saying it is the VVPAT that is actually causing these troubles. Otherwise, the process is robust. You actually remove the VVPAT because the ballot unit is a simple enough circuit. All that it says is the serial number, and the serial number against what serial number against what is the symbol. So that is not known at all. It is never fed into any of these systems, right? Because it is, if you see, even in your ballot unit, the list of serial number, that is not an electronic display. It is actually a paper that is just pasted against each 1, 2, 3, right? And what it stores is just 1, 2, 3. So there is the possible, and also the EVMs themselves are assigned that randomization process, the lot system that everybody is privy to, all polling agents are privy to. So in fact, his point is that without the VVPAT, perhaps the EVM system is not so much of a concern, right? But even there, then there is a question of voter verifiability, right? So there, the problem where the voter himself can verify. So the best way to assuage all of these concerns is to have a VVPAT, have the slip given to the voter, have the voter put it in the ballot box, and tally the recorded vote as well as the printed vote.
Yeah.
This would take care of all concerns. Except, of course, there will be localized concerns if somebody puts a gun to your head or says that you captures this thing and then votes for everybody who has not voted. All of those will anyway be there. Those you're never going to be able to get rid of, because at the end of the day, you will need polling officers. If those polling officers turn out to be malicious actors, that is something that you will not be able to. But otherwise, systemically, you can still localize the problem.
Now, so after your deposition at the Citizens Commission on Elections, in 2021, the CC came out with a report. And in the report, it stated, amongst a lot of other things, that there were substantial discrepancies in voter turnout and votes poll data on EVMs across over 373 constituencies in the 2019 elections. Now, this is extremely serious if it's true. Now, what details do you have on this, and basically, what are your views on this?
See, so we also need to know in which of these cases the discrepancy was substantial. Part of the reason I say is there are a lot of human actors. So how does the Election Commission get this data? It is from the collection of the 17A and 17C forms at each of the polling stations. And sometimes what happens, all those 17C, 17-9 forms are also humanly generated. So if I say 13,717 is the votes polled, I say, and it's written as 13,717. But while feeding in the data, it is written as 18,717. It happens all the time. So if that is the case, so if you actually, it's a possibility that there is a mismatch every now and then, because in our country, the election is a humongous exercise. There's no question, right? So, but because what has happened in this case is that the Election Commission's stubbornness and also their questionable acts of not publishing the 17C data anymore, right? So usually, the 17C forms were actually put out, and now they've stopped doing the 17C, and they only give us, the totals, the aggregate that they internally have calculated. So they've
basis, did the CCE say that 373 constituencies had issues?
So there were issues, there were discrepancies. At that time, yes, they were publishing it. Thereafter, they stopped publishing. Right? There were discrepancies. It is for the Election Commission certainly to explain those. But I'm saying it is possible to explain many of those discrepancies. It's an exercise that the Election Commission ought to have done.
So if you remember, the report also said that EVMs went missing. 20 lakh electronic voting machines that have gone missing from the Election Commission office. So, and it says that ECI did not come out with a statement and they could not justify how this happened, or there was silence. So what about this case where so many...
And that is a lingering issue, right? So in fact, Mr. Venkatesh Nayak has written quite a bit about it, right? So the lack of transparency in general, right? So whether it is discrepancy in counts, whether it's missing EVMs, or whether it is also about defective and malfunction. If you see the number of malfunctioning reports, and in fact, the only explanation that the ECI seems to have is that, mock polls are not clear. There were several, there have been documented instances of malfunction. How is it that this is such a simple electronic system? That is what they say. It's not a complicated system. It's a simple system. Therefore, it cannot be hacked. It's not a complex software system where people can inject a Trojan horse or whatever, right? With such a simple electronic system, how is it that you're not even able to guarantee 99.99%, right? So it doesn't even have to be 99.9999% that is required for, all these quality measures. You are not even able to see. I think if you take out the number of people, in fact, there was a report in Mysore 2-3 days back saying about average of 50-60 machines, I don't know what is the denominator, have malfunction. How is it that malfunction can be this widespread? Again, the Election Commission has not been particularly transparent about why there has been so much malfunction.
Yeah.
So in general, anything with respect to EVM and VVPAT, to a great dismay and disappointment, the Election Commission has been very economical with their transparency.
So as you spoke about the kind of money that the Election Commission has spent, the ECI has invested about 5,000 crore rupees of the taxpayers' money in procuring about 24 lakh.
I don't know if that number is accurate, but it comes from some vague memory. I think it's 5,000 crore and perhaps even more.
I think I read up, so I think it's 5,000 crores and they procured around 24 lakh VVPAT machines with that. Now, as the election is progressing, the taxpayers or also the voters have every right to know if their votes have been properly registered and it is not tampered with. Now, this is our democratic right. What are your final thoughts on what should be the way forward?
The way forward is, in many ways, it's fairly simple. It doesn't require too much re-engineering of any of these systems that are there, right? So you can have the voter use the ballot unit to register their vote, have the VVPAT print the slip, give the voter a possibility of the voter satisfying himself the slip has in fact printed what he did press, and have the voter place it in the ballot box and have a tally of all the 100% of the electronic counts with what is voter verifiable slips. There are a few other tweaks as well that can be done. Right? I've been a counting agent to an independent candidate in the February 2022 Delhi Assembly elections. And I saw the VVPAT counting firsthand. It is not easy to count. You have, because they are very thin slips and they stick to each other. In fact, every time the people who are in charge of counting actually counted the slips, they got different counts by 10 or 15 here and there. Right? So you need to be mindful. Maybe there is a technological upgrade that is required, that print out slips that can be easily counted. Right? So those are the tweaks that be there. But otherwise, this process is there. It's just that a few tweaks need to be.
I'm sure that this should be the way forward, but we're all pretty sure that this is not going to happen anytime, at least this elections. Thank you, Prasanna, for all your insights. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me here, Prema.